What is it with Shedeur? Do you think it's just people trying to make him slide down? Like, what is going on over here with this guy?
Most of us come to the table with who we are, what our credentials are, what we've accomplished, and what people see us as having the ability to accomplish in the future, right? But when you're Shedeur Sanders, son of Dion, you're bringing a lot more to the table. You can watch tape and come up with things that you're going to ding him on just like anyone else. And I'm not going to sit here and believe that every person who is downgrading him is downgrading because they don't like his dad. The tough part is, because he's Shedeur Sanders, if you do come out and say, well, I don't like this, this, and this, it's often moved to the side because they believe you are being petty. If Cam Ward does go 1 to Tennessee, I'm struggling to find a reason why Cleveland wouldn't take him at 2.
Welcome in. It is the Tuesday, April 1 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov, the NFL owner meetings. A lot going on Monday. There's going to be a lot more coming up on Tuesday today. But today is a Tuesday, and usually we have a special spotlight guest, someone from the NFL who deserves more recognition. This one is going to be a little bit different. We do have a special guest. It's the one, the only, the great Charles Davis from CBS Sports, calling games, NFL Network, on the draft set. Madden, of course, you've heard his voice over the years whenever you play the video games. He's part of the 33rd team as well. This is really the first episode that we've done here on NFL Spotlight, talking extensively about the draft. We brought in one of the great voices in Charles to talk about some of the things here. I do want to spotlight Charles eventually. I think that's probably going to happen over here later in the offseason once everything quiets down, because he's had a tremendous career and really one of the great voices of the NFL. We will talk more about what happened at the owner meetings on Monday on the back end of the show. All of the AFC coaches spoke, a bunch of GMs spoke, NFC coaches coming up today, a lot of votes coming up today. That discussion on the back end with Ben Allen. But for now, here is my full discussion with Charles Davis as we look ahead to the 2025 NFL Draft, which is coming up in a little over 3 weeks. He is one of my favorites from NFL Network and CBS. It's the one and only Charles Davis. Charles, thank you so much for doing this. We are a little over 3 weeks away from the draft. How are you feeling about things here?
As usual, Ari, first of all, hello. It's good to talk with you again, and glad to be in this forum and doing it. But as usual, about 3 weeks out, I'm waking up in the middle of the night going, oh, I haven't done this. I haven't done that. Did I get here? And the worst thing, as you know, is that all of a sudden you hear a name pop up somewhere. Someone kind of casually mentions a certain name, and you're like, have I done work on that person yet? It's not even necessary that you might not know them, because that's going to be kind of rare. But occasionally it's like, have I done enough work on them yet? Oh my goodness. Someone thinks they're in the second round, and you just kind of have to go from there. So once you tamp down those little panic attacks that kick in and just stay focused, stay with it, we'll eventually be in Green Bay and we'll be off and running. I have confidence that we'll be ready. I'll be ready by the time we get to Green Bay. But right now, not feeling that I am.
Well, it definitely creeps up on you. But before I get into everything, I do want to ask you just like a bit of a story time here based off that answer you just gave. Have you ever been on the draft set with you and DJ and whatever, and round 5 comes up and a player gets drafted that you guys really did not study? Did that ever happen to you?
I think it's really, really rare. And Ari, it probably kicks in much more round 6, 7, where a guy will pop up, where teams will take a player as opposed to wanting to fight in free agency for him. As an undrafted free agent, they think he's a priority for them. So sometimes they go and get them. That's really rare. Who was that safety that the Raiders took many years ago out of Ohio and played pretty well for them? I can't remember his name now, saved my life, but he popped up in the 3rd round. And Mike Mayock was our draft expert at the time. And Mike
Mitchell.
Yeah, Mike Mitchell, thank you. Mike had a nice career in the NFL, but he was on no one's radar. I don't know what happened, but he pops up. I wasn't on the desk at that time, and Mike said on air, fortunately, he got a tip about a week before that this guy was rising and whatever. So Mike went, the second round? Maybe even the second round. So that was one of them. The rest of them are much more, occasionally a guy will pop up and people won't have it. I remember Quincy Williams coming out of Murray State, went in the third round. I was thrilled. I remembered him from the NFLPA game. I had that, was mentioning it and what have you. And someone wrote an article that no one knew, said on our desk, no one knew, which absolutely was wrong. If I don't know what they were watching or not watching that night, had him dialed in third round. I remember not mentioning that he was Quinton Williams' brother, which I'd regretted at the time, but I was much more focused on him. Speed was his calling card. This is why he's going to be in the league. He'll play special teams first, but this guy can fly. And you remember Jacksonville took him. People flipped out about him taking him in the third, and now he's had his success with the Jets. Kind of looks like an inspired choice. He didn't work in Jacksonville, or they didn't see the same value, but with the Jets, sure kicked in pretty well. But yeah, occasionally we will definitely get stumped as we go along the way. I don't want to act like there's never a time it doesn't happen.
I do remember the Mike Mitchell pick just because you mentioned Mayock, and he looked at Rich Eisen whenever that pick happened and was like, not on my sheet, not on my board, just not here. So he did have a nice career. But 47th pick, second round.
Week before, and someone mentioned it, but he hadn't had the chance to do that work. And it turned out Mike Mitchell's a pretty good player.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about this draft. And obviously everyone is now fully all in on the draft with free agency and that big wave over. But let's start at the very top of year, because Charles, I'm sure you've seen it, but there's been growing buzz over this last couple of weeks about Cam Ward, Titans' #1 overall pick. I'm curious just to hear from you. I know we always discuss a comp for a player, but for a player like him specifically, like what traits are you seeing that the Titans over this last couple of weeks have gotten to a point where people believe they might be leaning towards keeping this pick and taking a quarterback at #1?
Yeah, Ari, you're right. Because the initial comp that everyone is kind of locked in on, and remember, I hope everybody who listens and watches and hears me say it, this is not an accusatory finger. This is really kind of a consensus group think. And it was the easy one initially was Patrick Mahomes, because of the out of structure plays that Cam Ward is fond of making and makes pretty darn well, and has done it pretty darn well 3 different places, right? Incarnate Word, Washington State, Miami. At no place has he not made those types of plays. But for me, I'm looking at him and watching, okay, there were those out of structure plays because of the superiority of what that person feels about their game. His arm, his ability to stay out of trouble, to keep a play extended, keep it alive. And then, of course, the payoff on the other end, right? Aaron Rodgers, every time he got out of the pocket, as you know, Ari, he's not throwing the ball for a 5-yard check down if he got out of the pocket and extended a play. He's throwing the kill downfield, right? So I looked at that and watched and have been watching Cam Ward. And you know who I came up with for that? Was Caleb Williams coming out of USC. How many times did he extend the play, keep it alive, make the big play, which led to a problem as a rookie, right? 68 sacks he took. Not all of those are on the offensive line, despite the fact that's how it looks. A lot of times, young quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks often get sacked more than the non-mobile ones because they think they can still make a play and they won't give up on anything. The second part when I watched him was we keep saying there's certain things we're looking to see Cam Ward do that maybe we haven't seen. And at each level, right, when he went from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami, kept waiting for different things. You know that reminded me of? C.J. Stroud. You remember at Ohio State, we didn't see him run very much. We didn't see him do this. And then, of course, came the big game in the college football playoff when he just shredded Georgia and almost had Ohio State win that game. And it kind of helped, it helped a lot, right? And the third is, I think Cam Ward's an uber competitor. I think he's a guy that has a chip on his shoulder. Remember, 0 stars coming out of high school. Not many offers. It was almost Incarnate Word or bust, wasn't it, Ari? Like no one was really that locked in on him. I think he played like a Delaware wing tee in high school, and no one really knew what to do. But this kid keeps that fire with him. So you know what that is? That's Baker Mayfield. It's absolutely Baker Mayfield to me. Doesn't have every measurable you're looking for, yet is still good. Remember, Mayfield went number 1 in the draft, and a lot of people were saying, well, he's not built like this. He doesn't move like that. He doesn't do this. But that competitive instinct, the ability to make those plays, a team rallies around him. I think Cam Ward has a lot of those similarities too. So I gave you a composite of 3 different people because I think the Mahomes thing is still too rich for me.
Yeah.
I can't get there. I'm sorry. Maybe down the road he might do that. But I think the composite of these 3, I think that's not so bad because I named 2 Heisman Trophy winners and the number 2 overall pick in the draft. I think that's pretty good.
I would agree with that. I mean, you mentioned the competitiveness. I mean, he had his pro day a little over a week ago. I mean, you know how much he wants to go number 1. He makes that big throw, looks at the Titans brass. I'm solidifying this right here, right now, here today. So I do think he ends up going number 1. I know the Titans publicly are trying to say that we're willing to listen if that Godfather offer comes in. But if it doesn't, it does sound like he will go number 1. Now, the other quarterback that's interesting is Shedeur, and I think he's one of the more polarizing ones because some people have him top 5, top 3. I know your first mock draft, you had him at number 1 overall. Some guys have him out of the first round. I mean, what is it with Shedeur? Do you think it's just people trying to make him slide down? Like, what is going on over here with this guy who is also competitive, is a winner, Jackson State, Colorado, and did not have the best offensive line in both places? Like, what is it about him that people are so all over the map with him?
I think that, Ari, there's so many things that come with it. Most of us come to the table with who we are, what our credentials are, what we've accomplished, and what people see us as having the ability to accomplish in the future, right? Floor, ceiling, all those scouting terms we use. But when you're Shedeur Sanders, son of Dion, you're bringing a lot more to the table than the average person. And I'm not going to sit here and believe that every person who is downgrading him is downgrading because they don't like his dad. They're not just downgrading him because they don't like, the fact that, he came from a privileged background in terms of a father who was an incredible player at 2 sports and, of course, knows how to manipulate the media like nobody's business because he understands how the game is played, right? He has created a persona that is unmatched in our world today in terms of sports. But, oh, yeah, you want to check the credentials of playing? Whatever persona he wanted to create, he was phenomenal as a player, phenomenal as a baseball player. He did things we all just wish we could. And sometimes that leads to jealousy, right? Pettiness, things that go with it there. But I don't believe that every bit of the evaluation, Ari, is because of that. You can watch tape and come up with things that you're going to ding him on just like anyone else. The tough part is because he's Shedeur Sanders, if you do come out and say, well, I don't like this, this, and this, it's often moved to the side because they believe you are being petty. It's a very weird dynamic that's going on. But I watch a young man who I think can play the game well from the pocket. I think that's where he's the most comfortable. Can he move around? Yes. Can he make some plays with his legs and pick up first downs, 1 or 2 a game? I think the answer is yes. I watched it on tape. But I think he's going to play in structure much more than he's going to play out of structure. Did he take some sacks that he didn't need to? Because the offensive line wasn't great. I'm not going to sit here and act like he took more. But there were times when he took some where, again, I think he was hoping to make a bigger play. You pass up this, you pass up that. I think the process of what he does has to be sped up a little bit. But I think he's got enough arm to make the throws you need to make. I think that people will understand there is a galvanizing effect about him, that people do like playing with him, want to play with him. But I definitely get why people have it, because a lot of what you'd say if we did a blind evaluation, didn't have a name on top of it, I go back to the Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis. Remember that draft? Whoa. At one point, we were talking about all 3 of them being first rounders. At one point, we were talking about all 3 of them not going in the first round at all. And as it turned out, 1 went in the first round, the other 2 went in the third. And when it all came down, you kind of understood it. Will Levis is about as close to that as you're going to get. That rise of Will Levis at the end of the draft process, right before the draft, Ari, I don't know what you felt, But I remember being at the draft and going, have I checked out for the last week somewhere? Did I miss something that happened in the last week that all of a sudden we're talking about him going in the top 5? And it didn't happen. And he ended up going where? First, was it the first pick of the second round?
Second pick.
Second pick of the second round. Maybe that's where he should have gone. But remember what went into all that was just so nuts. I feel like there's an element of that with Shedeur Sanders that we're really not sure. Like, we're really not locked in on it. But if Cam Ward does go 1 to Tennessee and they keep the pick, I'm struggling to find a reason why Cleveland wouldn't take him at 2. Because that's just a place that, I mean, quarterback has got to be figured out. We know that the big free agency gambit did not work with Deshaun. And now he's retorn the Achilles, so he's not back this year. Yeah, you got Kenny Pickett in the fold, but that's really not what you're thinking about for your future, I don't believe. I think it's going to be really difficult for Cleveland not to take him at 2. But if they don't, does that mean the Giants are locked in at 3? Because Joe Shane, their GM, certainly appeared like he's been there enough to pay Colorado taxes. So he's done his homework on this, and it certainly feels like that's where it is. But if we get fooled there and it's not in the top 3 picks, we may end up getting to where he goes a lot later in the first round than maybe we anticipated. I'm thinking Pittsburgh at 21. Do the Rams want to get him as their quarterback for the future? I believe at 26. Is that right, Ari? Somewhere in that neighborhood? Or do we end up going into the second round if no one trades back into the first to get him? It's a very, very interesting deal. And you're right. It is all over the map because I've talked with a bunch of people, as have you. And I'll bet you have grades first round high all the way into the second round would be my guess.
It's so interesting, Charles, because you mentioned the Browns, and there's a contingent of people who believe they're waiting for Kirk Cousins eventually after the draft. Stefanski worked with him as an OC and quarterbacks coach in Minnesota. They could probably get him for a decent contract when they trade for him, if they trade for him. The Giants element, I've heard that they were at every single Colorado game this year, so they've seen him up and close all year long, along with Travis Hunter as well, if they want to go in that direction. So the question of if those two teams pass, where does he go? Can New Orleans become an option at number 9? It is so interesting. And I mean, this could be a situation where, NFL Network and ESPN, if that does happen, I mean, it's the talk the entire night of that first round of the draft. And this kind of brings me to the other quarterback in here, because if you told me in Indy at the combine that Jaxson Dart is a first round quarterback, nobody would have believed you. Now this thing is building up that maybe he could be, or is he another Will Levis and Malik Willis and all those guys? And I can't figure that out. Where do you sit with him as well? Is he also in that bucket? Because I've heard from people that Shedeur is closer to Jaxson Dart than he is to Cam Ward. Do you feel the same?
I've heard that a lot. Especially recently, that it's become, more than a 2 quarterback race. That if the right team was in a spot, they would take Jaxson Dart before they would take Shedeur. I've heard those types of things. Who knows if that's true or not true, right? Those are the types of things you're hearing. I came out of the combine saying Jaxson Dart was a first-round quarterback. I came out of the combine saying he was the 3rd guy. I actually said it before the combine, and I left there still saying it. In fact, I think you saw my first mock draft where I had him number 3 to the Giants. That was where it was a really good idea that I wasn't on social media. I think people thought I'd slipped a cog or 2, right? That was a week before free agency. And then what happened in free agency, Ari? The Jets filled their spot with Justin Fields at 7. Where were they, 6?
7.
7. Who's 6?
Oh, sorry. Raiders 6, Jets 7, yes.
The Raiders at 6 filled theirs by trading for Geno.
Yeah.
Right? New Orleans at that time told the world, Mickey Loomis, their GM, no. We're good with Derek Carr. We've got Hayner. We've got Rattler. We're not thinking quarterback, right? So if that holds, you take that off the table at 9 and you start looking for those spots. And I was getting all the way to 21 with Pittsburgh, right? Before I got to another quarterback spot. So I put Dart at 3 because in my experience and our experience, we've never seen a quarterback artificially pushed up and taken before he was supposed to. That's never happened in the history of this league. Tongue firmly in cheek. So I threw it out there as if things go haywire, these types of things can happen. Because then if you don't take him at 3, you got to start playing the game of how far back can I go and make sure I still get him, who might swoop in just in case. Or as you pointed out, maybe we're all trying too hard. The second round is where he's going to go anyway. Heck, Geno Smith was a lock first rounder all the way up until the draft went in the second round.
Mhm.
So anything can happen come draft night. But I think he's a first-round quarterback because I think in this draft, I think people can't wait till the second to try and get him. And I do see these spots. Pittsburgh 21. Would we establish the Rams again? 26?
26.
Right?
26.
26 as a quarter. And notice these places I'm talking about. We're all talking quarterback in waiting except for really Pittsburgh. But if Pittsburgh signs Aaron Rodgers, that doesn't mean he's off the table. Then he becomes quarterback in waiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all these things start to kick in for me, but I'm still thinking for him, quarterback in waiting, some things he's got to work on along the way. But he is kind of I hate to use the term poor man's because that's damning the kid with faint praise. But in a lot of ways, he's my Bo Nix this year without the same conviction on Nix that other people had. Extremely accurate throwing the football, well put together as a kid, ton of experience in college, played at 2 different schools to gain the knowledge and the experience and obviously adjust and adapt. A Utah kid ending up in Mississippi and embracing it and being embraced, which is no small feat. I'm a New York kid that went to school in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I grew up with my mother from Tennessee, my dad from West Virginia, and I was told there that I was a damn Yankee until I became a starter. Then I'd just be a Yankee. So I know that when you make these moves, it's not as easy as what people think. But I just think that Dart has that it factor to him that he's going to work and figure it out and become a player. But I do think a lot of people would like for him to have some time to himself before he has to become the face of the franchise and start as a rookie.
I mean, I've heard the Bo Nix thing as well, where last year there was, is he actually going in the first round? And of course, he goes number 12. But you mentioned this before. It just, that 21 draft where people are talking about Pickett going as early as 6, and we'll get Malik Willis maybe going at 2. And there was Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder and all these guys, and all of them ended up going, forget about the first round, not even in the second round for some of those guys, all the way into the third round, Sam Howell in the 5th round. Like, that element of it is still out there. And I think maybe we'll get clarity as we get closer and closer to the draft. But right now, around the league, it's a lot of spitballing. And I don't think there's enough facts out there as of right now when it comes to these quarterbacks. Let's go over to the
real quick before we finish there. Do you feel, to me, this year, as different from last year, we had such conviction about the 6 last year that went in the first 12 picks. And really that conviction paid off. Like these kids performed. Okay. JJ McCarthy couldn't because he was hurt. Penix didn't get to play until late, but he showed why he went at 8, even though it was a major surprise. And Bo Nix went to Central Casting. He went to Sean Payton, who wanted him and saw him, and here's my next Drew Brees. But my point being, and my question is much more, last year we knew that conviction was there. They all had what you were looking for. We didn't have an Anthony Richardson with only 13 starts. Everybody had 30-plus starts and more. This year's group has all of those same qualities, but we don't have nearly the conviction on them. So this year became the veteran quarterback draft, meaning those guys aren't drafted, but you're going to plug your holes with a veteran before you were going to wait and try and pick a rookie in this year's draft. That's how I'm seeing it. Is that what you're seeing, or is it something different?
I would agree with that, and I've heard that as well, where a lot of teams told us what they think of this draft in free agency, in the trade market. I mean, like you mentioned it before, the Jets signing Justin Fields, the Raiders signing Geno Smith, the Saints could have moved on from Derek Carr, but they retained him and restructured his contract to the max to get more cap space. The Giants going out of their way to sign 2 veteran quarterbacks and being in on Matthew Stafford and in on Aaron Rodgers and trying to trade to number 1. I feel like the actions of all these teams tells us what they think of the rest of the quarterbacks not named Cam Ward. That's the way I've read it, and other people have read it. But at the same time, you mentioned it before, these quarterbacks sometimes get pushed up the board, and that happened this year. And then, of course, there's the 2021 comparison. So this is the thing about it where everybody's trying to figure it out. But if you go based off the actions of all these teams at the top of the draft so far this offseason, they're telling you they don't love this quarterback class.
Yeah, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's not one that people are totally enamored with. Are they finding reasons to like certain people? Certainly. But it certainly doesn't appear that they want to like them really, really high in the draft, other than potentially Tennessee at 1. And I think Tennessee went into the whole process very open-minded, wanted to really dive in on it. And I do believe Mike Barganzi, their new GM, that he wanted, they were open for business. Okay, call us. But this wasn't 2016 when John Robinson was there and he said, "Give me a king's ransom," which he essentially got. Took Jack Conklin at 8, who was an all-pro as a rookie. But that was a year that Goff ended up going 1. The Rams came all the way up. Philadelphia made a couple jumps up and got up there to 2 and got Wentz. I don't sense people thinking about any type of anything close to a ransom to go get any of these quarterbacks this year, including at 1 with Tennessee and Cam Ward. Giants would be the closest, but they only go from 3 to 1. I'm not talking about coming from your 15, 20s and make a double jump to get somewhere. I don't see people doing that.
At this point, as I record right now, every single team still has their original first-round pick. No trades have been made so far in this draft. Let's pivot away from the quarterbacks into a position that might be revived a little bit, Charles, and that is the running backs. Last year, or the last couple of years, everyone was trying to devalue them and say you could find them anywhere. We see what happened in free agency last year with Saquon and Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry and how they helped their teams. And now this year's running back class might be the deepest we've had in a while. How many running backs do you think actually go in round 1? I think Genty is obvious, I would imagine.
Genty's
the lock. And then there's Hampton and Henderson and all those guys. How many guys do you think actually go in round 1 here this year?
Wouldn't surprise me to get 3. Would not surprise me to get 3. 2, I feel very strongly are going to go, and you've mentioned them already, in Genty of Boise State, Marion Hampton of North Carolina. Now you start to get into the next pool. What's your flavor? Because let's just use Ohio State as an example, right? Because Travion Henderson, tremendous player, and then Quinshon Judkins comes from the SEC at Ole Miss, dynamite, shows up at Ohio State. They split carries. Both of them are terrific. Just think both of them could go in the first, 40 picks? Okay, somewhere in the neighborhood. And both of them are like third team all Big Ten because neither one of them got the ball enough to do that. So just for everyone at home, no scout ever has said, well, this guy is first team all conference, that's why we should take him. Those things don't come into scouting at all. Just keep that in mind. But I think 3 is the number. Henderson is kind of the front runner on that. But it's an interesting thing because at Ohio State, Henderson, lighter, maybe catches the ball a little bit better out of the backfield. But if you want to have some thump and some bump, that's more Judkins' game. Okay, he's about 20 pounds thicker, runs the ball inside a little bit better. And I don't have it in front of me, and I really need to do this study. But empirical, and I don't have the empirical numbers, but my sense is, Ari, let's take the last 5 years of running backs in the league. I bet you if you take the top 10 runners each year, I bet you 6, 7 of them are 215 or bigger. Because the league has slimmed down on defense, because that's what we're sending out from the college game. And those who are committed and want to play big boy football, you can beat up one of those defenses on the other side. You can do that week in and week out if you have a thumper. And think about those people that we're talking about that led the league in rushing last year. Saquon, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. When Joe Mixon was healthy, boy, did he revive Houston, and boy, did he help them against Los Angeles in the playoff game when they hadn't run it well down the stretch. We're talking 220-pound backs plus.
Montgomery in Detroit also.
Pull on people over time, right? So that's what I'm thinking as we go into it. But I think that you kind of raised a question, even though we didn't fully ask it, and I'm going to ask it now. Drafting a great running back, but without the infrastructure, is that a good move early? right? Najee Harris came out of Alabama. Now, you talk about an odometer that turned over a lot because he got more carries at Bama than the normal back coming into the draft gets. But he goes to Pittsburgh, which seemed like a match made in heaven. But at that time, as you know, Ari, Pittsburgh was in the midst of like a 5-year stretch where they couldn't run the football at all.
Mm-hmm.
Stunning. You say Pittsburgh Steelers can't run the football. I'm running you to go see someone because that's just not right. But the numbers showed us that. They were like 28 to 32nd in the league for a 5-year stretch running the ball because they couldn't block people up front. Najee Harris's first 2 years in the league, I feel like some of his best runs were to get back to the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
Now Pittsburgh has figured out the O-line much better. They've gotten better up front. Now we'll see. They lost some guys, but they drafted to replace them. They ran the ball better, more effectiveness last year. But my point being, and I think you kind of were raising it, okay, draft a runner, but if he goes to the wrong team without an offensive line, is that really going to elevate things? Or is he just going to get beat up? I really think you've got to be in the right spot. Saquon was a really good player in New York. Superstar in Philadelphia because of that those guys up front blocking. Derrick Henry, Baltimore. Remember I used central casting before?
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest about it. When he signed with Baltimore, didn't the whole league kind of go, yeah, that makes sense, right? Of course he did, right? Because that's what the Ravens do. That's how they play like a Raven. Josh Jacobs getting to Green Bay, and they worked hard with their offensive line, and now he's got an opportunity and a chance. Mixon, a little bit of an anomaly because we talked about the offensive line in Houston, but still, I don't know if it was as bad as people thought with Laramie Tunsil. When they moved Titus Howard into guard, I thought that was an exceptional move for them. They could keep people healthy in the interior, and they had a miss with Kenyon Green when he was there in Houston. But I just think bigger, stronger, more physical backs. But I do believe they need to go to a place that's ready for them to be there. Because that Detroit offensive line was certainly ready for Sonic and Knuckles. Okay?
Well,
that allowed them to be terrific as well.
The two teams everyone is circling for running backs, and they really hope they go there just because of the situation, would be Chicago and Denver. And those are the two offensive lines that are pretty much set. So if they ever go in that direction, I know people who are in the fantasy community will be very excited to see those guys there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Do you think Hampton? Because I'm thinking Genty right now as I'm sitting here, it feels like Genty to the Raiders feels right.
Okay. There's I've heard a lot of it, but it's not set in stone. Not set in stone.
Not set in stone.
No.
But Pete Carroll, he had his guy. Take the pressure off my cue. I'm gonna play some defense. You know, I can't throw away what I've seen so much in the past. I'm just saying now, as you mentioned, here comes Chicago. Yeah. Give DeAndre Swift a running mate, right? Give him somebody else. Could that be Hampton that high? Potentially, right? And then Denver, as you mentioned, if it's not there, Denver needs it badly because Javonte Williams, that didn't work out as well for them. Right now, I think McLaughlin is probably their lead guy, and you want him to be the second back much more than you want him to be the lead. And that's what Sean Payton's looking for. He got his joker. Would you say he got his joker in Evan Ingram, Ari? Is the tight end part of his joker?
I would say they looked all over the place for one, and that's their guy so far. But they also want to find that guy in the backfield. And you can mark this down already. They're taking a running back in the first 2 rounds at some point. They just
have to, right? And by the way, if they don't get him in the first, plenty of really good options coming up in the second. It's a very good running back crop, in my opinion.
It's not a secret in the NFL, but Sean Payton has been doing excessive work on all the running backs in this year's class, looking to find this guy who will have over 1,000 yards from scrimmage in his rookie year. He's going to find that guy. He found Alvin Kamara in New Orleans. He's going to find that guy in this draft as well. Mark it down. Last thing I want to do over here with you, Charles, you're a former DB yourself. We have a very unique talent in this draft in Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
I think he goes somewhere in the top 4 would be my guess. How is he going to be used in the NFL? Does it depend on where he ends up? Do you just do both right away? Like, how do you envision this working with him?
I think Ari, it's a combo of ownership, GM, head coach, overall feel, philosophy, city. There's a lot that goes into this for me. I think I'm probably overthinking it. But I said this earlier today, and I feel pretty vindicated on it already. Mike Vrabel doesn't seem like the kind of guy, but remember how he played. Mike Vrabel outside linebacker, Mike Vrabel line up at the tight end or the extra tackle position, and what is he, 10 for 10 catching touchdown passes. I think he has an appreciation for guys who can do more than one thing, and I don't think he would turn down the opportunity. I think that he would welcome it. But if I'm New England and I draft Travis Hunter, I got to play him on offense first because I haven't scared anyone on offense in years.
Mm-hmm.
People may respect what they have done, but no one feared New England for years. Even Josh McDaniels last year when they won 10 games, they respected what they were doing. In fact, it was Josh is really doing a great job with that rookie quarterback. But did anyone lie awake at night worried about what somebody was going to do? No. Hasn't been like that forever. They got to have him. Getting Stephon Diggs as a start. I really think that most owners, Ari, if you draft Travis Hunter, are going to want him to play offense first. Mm-hmm. That's where you're going to sell the tickets. The ball gets in his hands. They want to see a guy scoring touchdowns, etc. I still think no matter which side you play him on, you can have a package for him on the other. And just have to see how you go about load management. But this is our first real load management player we've had coming to the NFL in a while about what he can handle. Because here's my only worry about him. I think he played in the high 170s in terms of weight his last year at Colorado. I know he weighed in bigger at the combine, but I don't think he played at that level in terms of that weight. Mm-hmm. Now he's young. Weight will start to stay on him better as you get older with the maturity factor. Because when you're really young, it melts right off of you, especially if you play 115 plays a game. Mm-hmm. I think as he gets older, better nutrition, weight room, just maturity of age, the weight will stay on. And maybe he can play a little bit more because the pace of the NFL game is not the pace of the college game, but the hits of the NFL game far outstrip the hits of the college game. So one side giveth, one side taketh away. But I think most owners, if you poll them, they're going to want to play offense first. That's just my sense of it.
I mean, I look in New England number 4. You have Christian Gonzalez. You have Carlton Davis. They just signed him here in free agency. Receiver room, it's Stephon Diggs and a bunch of guys. I think it would make sense there for them if they go in that direction to potentially start him on offense, have a third down package or whatever on defense, and move forward like that. I mean, that's the team that I have him circled going to right now. If I was to make a mock draft here right now today on March 31st. Last thing before I let you go, Charles, if there's one player right now not being talked about as a first-round guy, who is it in your mind?
Not being talked about as a first-round guy that I believe is?
Yeah.
I think he's teetering on it. So I'm not going to say no one's talked about it, but I think the kid out of Kentucky, Max Hairston, the corner, I like him a ton. And that's hard being a Tennessee Volunteer, okay? But watching him play, watching his movement skills, watching his ball skills, watch his ability to come up and tackle when he needs to, I think he needs a little more weight on him. But there's also a personality to him that I like a lot in my corners. And he's tested well, he's run well, he's played well when the tape has been on. He's one. And the other is not going to go in the first round, but I think he would have if he'd played the entire year this year. And that's Savon Revel, the corner out of East Carolina. I think he's a little raw, Ari. Okay? I think there's some stuff they still have to go through. And he might be a little bit older because remember, he came out of school, went to Lewisburg College. You know, they had to go there to get the grades before he could get to East Carolina. I like his backstory, the perseverance. I like East Carolina spotting him at a camp and staying with it. But this kid will come up and tackle. He will blitz. And when that ball pops free anywhere, it always seems like the guy wearing number 28, and that was his number in college, was around the ball and picking up the ball. Whether it was a fumble, ball popped in the air, he picked it off, he took it himself. Yeah, I can work with the coverage. We've got some stuff to do footwork-wise and some other things. But I just like the way he plays the game. Every snap, boom, he's on something. And when people have run trick plays, he's been the guy foiling them. right? I saw one where the team came out and they shifted here and they went there, they came here, then they ran the fake and he tackled the guy on the fake. Then he's blocked kicks coming off the edge. I saw block kicks. I saw one where it was a flea flicker pass. He picks it off in the middle, takes it for 6. There's something about people who are always around the football. Remember Jimmy Moreland, the corner? All right. I think came out of 1AA, maybe James Madison. I loved him. And I knew why he would go in the 6th or 7th round, wherever he went. But I loved him. You know why? 17 picks in college. I loved Kevin Byard, like 19, 20 picks in college. No, didn't get invited to the combine. Went the 3rd round to the Titans. You give me ball production. You give me takeaway. You've got my attention. It doesn't always pan out. But boy, I'm telling you, those guys who are around the ball a lot, they tend to find a place to play. Was it Amik Robertson coming out of Louisiana Tech?
Yep.
Looks like a nickel, built like a nickel, much better outside. It's one of those weird anomalies that you see. And that's where he plays best, and maybe even a safety. I think he's finally found his niche in the league as well.
Yeah. He's thriving in Detroit, had a season-ending injury in the final playoff game, but he has definitely found his home there. And I think there's going to be a bit of a run on those DBs. Bottom of the 1st round, early 2nd round. I think Maxwell Hairston. I think Buffalo there at 30 would make sense as well. They need another corner. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I love asking that question, especially to somebody like you who is so knowledgeable with all these players. Charles, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing all your insight, the quarterbacks, the running backs. We'll go a bit about defense as well. We'll continue to watch you here throughout the course of the month on NFL Network. And until we get to Green Bay on that Thursday, April 24, we can't get here soon enough. I mean, we can't wait till it happens. It's going to be a lot of fireworks. I expect it to happen.
Yeah, can't wait. Absolutely can't wait. What a great venue going to. Like any NFL city you go to is a great venue. But Titletown, USA, and Lombardi Statue, and Curly Lambeau, and come on. Doesn't get much better than that.
Does not get much better. Enjoy it once it gets here, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thanks a lot, Ari. You're the best.
Special thanks to Charles Davis for joining us here on this Tuesday. Like I said in the beginning, I want to bring Charles back on the show at some point here, probably after the draft, to spotlight him here on a Tuesday at some point. But some great insight from him on some of the big names here in the upcoming NFL draft. That is the first of, I would say, a few guests that we're going to have here talking draft, whether it's prospects or analysts. Expect some more of that here coming up in the coming days and weeks on NFL Spotlight. But let's wrap it up here on this Tuesday. A lot happened on Monday, a lot coming up here later today. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? It's great to see you. How are we wrapping up here on this Tuesday?
What's going on, Ari? We're going to get to the owners meeting stuff here in just a second, but we do have some breaking news as we are recording this here on Monday night. Aaron Rodgers has agreed to a contract with the Minnesota Vikings to become their fill-in starter. It seems like while JJ McCarthy is going to be getting his footing, another step towards becoming Brett Favre.
What are you saying? Where are you reading this from?
It's out there right now.
Shit faker. From who?
April Fools, Ari. Very, very happy to see that I can get you still on camera and get news to you before anything else. Oh, man, that made me happy. That was such a natural reaction too. All right, let's talk. Let's talk owners meetings in all seriousness and things that actually took place on Monday. Man, that was too good. All right, takeaways. Biggest thing that was being talked about there in Palm Beach, Florida, was the tush push, and it seems like everyone had a take on it. There was a lot of other stuff that took place with Jimmy Haslam talking about the Deshaun Watson situation. But go ahead and let me know, what were the biggest things that you took away, particularly with the tush push?
Still recovering from that one, Ben, but great job by you. Kudos to you. That was, was not ready for that, but great job. But I didn't know that all the NFL teams and owners and general managers, as we speak right now, when we're recording this at 9:20 p.m., are at a cocktail in the Breakers in Palm Beach. So it made no sense, but I still kind of fell for it. So good job by you. But as for the tush push, a lot of AFC head coaches and some general managers who spoke to the media addressed this. We heard from Sean McDermott, the Bills head coach, he wants it banned. But we heard from a bunch of coaches who were like, no, we want this to stay, including we saw the Colts general manager, Chris Ballard, Lions GM, Brad Holmes. We saw Patriots head coach, Mike Vrabel, the Colts head coach, Shane Steichen, Texans head coach, DeMeco Ryans. All of them were like, we don't want to ban this because this is a play that the Eagles are excelling at. There is no data out there that shows that there are injuries to this. So if that's the case, there's no reason to ban it. Now, let's take a bit of a step back for a second. Coaches and GMs and their opinions, it matters. But when the votes are going to happen on Tuesday, and I expect it to happen on Tuesday, whether they actually vote or table this is a different discussion, that is not voted by coaches or GMs. That is officially voted by owners. And owners could have differing opinions than their GMs and their coaches. And we've seen over the years some stuff just passes even though the head coaches didn't want it. For example, there was a time when they were able to pass the fair catch on kickoffs. There's been different things that owners did that teams didn't want to do, like the GMs and coaches. So this thing really will come down to ownership. I've heard more and more that there's people in the NFL circles when they're showing these presentations that it's not about injuries that have happened, which is very minimal. It's the potential for injuries that could happen, especially with the spine area. And the NFL, the way they work with all this is they're not going to wait for a disaster to happen. And that's part of the reason why this has become such a full-blown discussion of here about potentially banning this play. So we will see what happens here later today. But in order for this to pass, you need 24 votes from owners to say, yes, it's banned. If the Eagles and a bunch of other teams say no, you need 9 no's for this not to work, then this thing is not passing. There is still a possibility, like I said before, that membership, the ownership, and Roger Goodell realize we don't have the votes right now, so we're not going to vote on this, and we're going to table it to the May meeting. So that's also possible of here, but we should have some clarity on this later today. Some of the other things that happened throughout the course of Monday, and again, NFC head coaches are going to have their media sessions here on Tuesday morning. So while you listen to this, some NFC coaches are going to be speaking as well down there in Florida. But some other things that happened here, the Browns owners, D. Haslam, Jimmy Haslam, they spoke to local media. And there was one thing that I think fans have been waiting for them to say this. And, NFL people like myself have been waiting for them to finally admit this. And they did here on Monday, which is essentially saying the Deshaun Watson trade, 3 first-round picks and more picks, plus $230 million fully guaranteed, quote, was a big swing and a miss. And there's really no other way around it. He's only started 19 games. He is slated to miss this entire 2025 season with a torn Achilles, which he re-ruptured again after tearing it the first time this past season. And they gave up so much and so much money. And for them to finally acknowledge this was a whiff, they've had chances to do it in the past. They stood behind him. And essentially, Jimmy and D. Haslam told the reporters that if there's anyone to blame, it's us. And it's been pretty much a big debate in the NFL community about whose decision was it to actually go this far and do it. Because if you recall, when Deshaun Watson was looking to get traded, there were 4 teams who were interested. And the first team that he said no to was the Browns. Eventually, the Browns circled back by giving him a God offer that he could not say no to. And of course, he took it. But who was the person behind it? And for them to come out and say, blame us, it was an organizational decision with everyone involved. But we were the ones who gave the green light and signed off on it. I think that's a big deal because, of course, Andrew Berry, the GM, is still there, and Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, is also still there. But this also tells us that despite the fact that Deshaun Watson's under contract this year, he's not going to play, but also next year, it's unlikely he's going to be the quarterback in 2026. There's a better chance that they eventually just cut him or tell him to stay home or whatever, because you don't just make this announcement with him still on the roster with a chance of him being the quarterback. So this is a situation right now where they're going to pay him $46 million in cash this year, $46 million in cash next year. His cap number next year is $81 million. They might restructure it again to lower it so they continue to build out the roster in 2026. But whenever they officially move on from him, they're going to take on over $50 million in dead money and potentially more if they restructure that deal again next year. So it's been an all-around disaster, and they finally admitted it here on Monday. We will see what they do to go into this season with the quarterback plan. Right now they have Kenny Pickett. They have that number 2 overall pick. The Kirk Cousins element is still out there, where maybe after the draft, they trade for him. Their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, was his quarterbacks coach in Minnesota, was his offensive coordinator in Minnesota for a year. There is a prior relationship there. So if they pass on a quarterback on number 2, if they pass on a quarterback in round number 2 as well, maybe that option becomes reality for them. But the Deshaun Watson era, it started about 3 or 4 years ago, traded for him, suspension, injury, another injury, barely on the field. Even when he was on the field, there was more bad than good. It does sound like that experiment is essentially over. He's still going to be carried on the roster, but eventually he will not be the quarterback for this team anymore. Some other things here, again, just coming up later today. Expect some more votes potentially on the Lions' proposal on reseeding the playoffs, where a wild card team, if they have a better record than the division winners, that they could get a home playoff game. Does not sound like there is momentum for that. I would be surprised if they even vote for it, but that is out there. The Lions' proposal also to make defensive holdings and illegal contact into not automatic first downs does not sound to me like there's momentum for that. Some of the things that there is momentum for going into Tuesday, the kickoff rule, moving a touchback from the 30-yard line to the 35-yard line. It does sound like there is momentum for that to happen. The NFL liked what they saw last year. They want to see more returns. This would be a solution to get more returns and less touchbacks in the game. And then the instant replay with replay assist, it does sound like there is momentum for using that more in situations where a flag is thrown on the field. And if you want to overturn that flag, if it was wrong, that has momentum. What does not have momentum is if a flag was not thrown. For example, the Sam Darnold face mask on Thursday night versus the Rams, where it was clearly a face mask, but no flag was thrown. Under the current proposal that is out there, the NFL would not be able to throw a flag using replay assist. A flag must be thrown initially, and then you could use replay assist, is what currently has momentum. But those are some of the things that are coming up. We should potentially have some other media news as well. The NFL announced on Monday that Thursday night flexing, which we had this past year, where the NFL flexed a Broncos-Chargers game into Thursday night football. Previously, you had to have 4 weeks notice in order to make that happen. That is now changing to 3 weeks notice to make that happen. So that is some media news. Maybe we have some other things come out as well, including the future of Hard Knocks, NFL Films, NFL Plus, and some other things. We could get that on Tuesday as well. We'll also get word if the NFL owner meetings will extend into Wednesday. Sometimes they need the extra day. Sometimes they don't. If they don't, we should have a press conference from Roger Goodell on Tuesday evening, recapping the few days down there in Florida. But we will have much more coverage of the owner meetings from Florida here tomorrow on NFL Spotlight. As always, rate, review, and subscribe. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else. And of course, full coverage on X at My Sports Update. If you have any suggestions for a future Spotlight guest, as always, you can DM me. You can DM Ben at Ben Allen Sports. You can leave a comment on YouTube in the reviews, whatever it is. We will take a look, and if we think that person is worthy, we will look into it. So stay updated with everything, and we will see all of you here tomorrow morning.